Okay, you should get notification on your end, and while you click that, I am going to pull up the study guide and walk you through it. Okay, here's what your study guide looks like. Okay, pretty straightforward. We're going to spend a little time right now talking through the framework of the test. I always talk to people, students, and they hadn't looked at the framework of the test. They're trying to study for an exam they have not looked at and they don't know anything about. So we're going to talk a little bit about that this morning, just to kind of, give you some information about that. And we're going to hit competency 1, domain 1. That's where we're hanging out today. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about procedural steps. We're going to talk a lot about the law because you're being tested on the law. So you need to know what the law says. So that's where we're going to kind of spend our time. And by the end of the day, you will understand what the role of an educational diagnostician is and the procedures that you are responsible for implementing with fidelity and per law. That is the foundation, not only for the exam that you're going to take, but for the role that you'll be in as an educational diagnostician. This is the bread and the butter right here, foundation. Okay, so that's what we'll hit on today. All right, so I have notes over here. You're going to see me looking over here because I'm reading notes, then looking back at you. So don't let that distract you, okay? So let's talk about the explanation of the exam framework. The exam itself, it is 5 hours. You have 5 hours to take it. I believe the first 10 or 15 minutes are where you're going through what the instructions are, how to go through the functionality of the exam, how to click, all that kind of great thing. The number of questions, you have 90 selected response questions and 1 constructed response question. 1 is enough, isn't it? You have 1 constructed response question. Of course, the exam is taken by computer. Now, the breakdown is really, really important. Here are your domains. You are being tested on 4 domains. The first domain, identification and assessment, that look how much this is. It is 34% of your exam, and then all the other parts are much smaller. Competency, so domain 1, when you're attacking the test, you have got to know domain number 1. You have to. It is the major part of your test. Okay, domain 2 is where traditionally students do the best in because they're teachers. So it's curriculum, instruction, and what strategies you offer for intervention. Okay, the next one is professional responsibilities. What does a diagnostician do? What are the ethics associated with your role? Okay, what does a diag do? That's what this is. And number 4 is your constructed response. There's 4 domains. Okay, and again, domain number 1 is the highest percentage. Okay, here's a link right here that I gave you so you can click on it and read more about the framework of the examination, and it takes you here. Do you see the green screen? Can you see it on your end? Okay, great. So when you're thinking about, okay, well, what is in domain 1? It's right here. Domain 1 is about identification. That's what we're talking about today. Domain 1 also hits assessment, huge part of your exam. Domain 1 is competency 1, competency 2, and competency 3. Okay, domain 2, curriculum and instruction, is 4 and 5. Okay, and then 3 is competency 6 and 7, ethics, law, Competency 7. Competency 6 is how are you bringing in other elements, other collaborators, other stakeholders into your world of special education. And then domain 4, like we said, is the constructed response, competency 8. Okay, so really, 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 really important to know what the framework of the exam is today. We're doing domain 1 and we're just focusing right here on competency 1. These descriptive statements are the knowledge, the skills that your exam question comes from. What the entry-level educational diagnostician should be able to do. Skill. What the entry-level educational diagnostician should know. Knowledge. Skills, knowledge. That's what your test is going to be based on. These descriptive statements under each one of these competencies. This is guiding your study. Okay, so again, today we're on domain 1, competency number 1. The next section, I'm going to do domain 1. The next time I do a group eval, it's going to be domain 1, competency 2, and then so on, so on, so on. Okay, so let's get to competency 1. Competency 1 says apply knowledge of the requirements for identifying a student who meets disability criteria and determining the need for specialized instruction. What does that mean? That means and people miss this. When I say people, I mean people outside of the role of an educational diagnostician, like the SPED teacher, the administrators, the parents, and so on, especially gen ed teachers. To qualify for special education, it is two-pronged. 1, you have to have a disability identified. There's some disability criteria that you have to meet, and most people know that, and they hang their hat there. And they assume that since a student meets criteria for a disability, boom, you qualify for special education. But that is not what the law says. The law says, and there has to be a need for specialized instruction. You have to have a disability criteria and show a need for specialized services, specialized instruction. Those two things are what qualifies a student for special education services. Okay, that is the foundation of everything that you will ever hear forever and ever. Amen, amen. About being an educational diagnostician is these two things. All right. So the process of identifying if there's a disability condition and determining that there is a need for specialized instruction, that process is called child find. Child find. Okay, so let's talk about what child find is. I'm going to take you to the notice of procedural safeguard booklet. That's where we're going to start first. I put the link to that safeguard booklet right here. When you click that link, you're going to end up here. Are you seeing my screen change? Sometimes you can't see it. Yes, okay. All right, so this is what we call Region 18 legal framework. Do you guys know about this Region 18 legal framework? Have you heard of it? This should be pinned to your computer. This is your everything go-to guide, Bible, if you will, of all things educational diagnostician. This is it. This is the legal framework, okay? Where I'm going to take you first is publications. I'm going to click on that. And then these are the publications that you have got to know front to back, these two. Notice of procedural safeguards and the parent guide to the ART process. The Notice of Procedural Safeguards is a booklet that condenses the law that you find in this website into layman's terms so that a normal, regular person, like a parent, can understand what the law is saying about this child find process, this process of identifying and assessing to determine if the student meets criteria for special education. Okay, you're able to click here, it'll show you English, Spanish, or even these other languages, which is pretty amazing. Okay, I want to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to open up what I have down here. Okay, I'm going to share again. Okay. Let's see if I let me scroll up. Yeah. There we go. This is a notice of procedural safeguard. It is updated routinely. Okay, this is February 2021. This is the last update. So this is the version that you should be looking at. This right here, you need to know cover to cover. Highlight, sticky notes all over it, notes you've written in it. This right here, you have got to know. Okay, the role of the diagnostician in the child find process is to ensure that all the procedures outlined in this law are implemented with fidelity and with, they updated for September. Excellent. Let me look and see. Thank you for saying that. I'm going to go back here. September. Excellent. So I correct that. Thank you for saying it, Allison. September 2022 is the most current update, friends. So that's what you want to look for. Okay, September 2022. All right. I'm going to scroll down to page number 2. All right. So again, as you go through this period of procedural safeguards, what I was saying here is that we're responsible as a diagnostician for ensuring that all of these procedures are implemented according to law. Okay. And usually the updates, every now and again, there's an update to idea to the law. 2021. What was probably different between 21 and 22 is the vocabulary and terminology. But we're going to see that in just a minute. Okay. So of course, these are all the components of the law that it hits on. And again, this book is saying to the parent, here's what the procedures are, and here's the rights that you have in regard to these procedures being implemented. And I'm going down to page number 2, where it talks about child find. Okay, all children with disabilities residing in the state of Texas who are in need of special education and related services, including children with disabilities who are homeless. If children are homeless, can we evaluate them for special education? Yes, per law. Or children who are in foster care, children who are wards of the state, and there's a suspected disability condition. Can they be evaluated? Yes, by law. What about children who are in private schools? They're not even enrolled in public school. They're in private school. The law says yes. Public school evaluators evaluate children in private school. By the way, homeschool is considered private school by law in the state of Texas. Public Evaluators in the public school system do evaluate children who are homeschooled by law. Regardless of the severity of the disability, they must be identified, located, and evaluated. This process of identifying, locating, evaluating is called child find. Okay, and as you go throughout the book, it explains that more. All right, so let's talk about what related services are. We're going to see this in just a moment whenever we go to the legal framework. Related services, what does that even mean? What are related services? Services like special education, transportation, occupational therapy, physical therapy, extended school year, so on and so on, so on. Special education services and related services that may be needed. Okay, when you hear someone say, well, that violates child find, that violates child find, you will know something went awry with the identification or the locating or the evaluating of a child. Either a timeline was missed or someone said, we don't test children in private school, they're not enrolled here, we can't do that. That violates child find law. If you didn't do it in a timely manner, that violates child find law. Any misstep in following and implementing procedures or the timelines that govern these procedures violates child find law. Okay, so again, this procedural safeguard lifts special education law, wraps it into normal words so that normal people can understand it. But when you are testing, you're testing and you're writing in language found in this legal framework. This is the jargon that we write in and test in and work in. Okay, so I'm back at this back at this Region 18 framework. I'm going to click right here. And this gives us all the frameworks, all the topics that are in special education law that the diagnostician is responsible for governing to most degree. Okay, disability conditions, you see evaluation here. The art process, what are the frameworks? What does the law say? What is each part of the art part for? All of this is what we're responsible for. Okay, so after you read through the procedural safeguard, get an understanding in normal language, you're going to come here to the legal framework, and this is where you're going to live and kind of chew on the terminology, chew on the vocabulary that you see embedded in the law. That is what you're going to see in your line of questioning on the exam. Okay, so I'm going to click on child find. That's the very first thing at the top of this page. The first framework you see is child find. When you look at the child find law, over here, you're going to see some coding. This practice, if you click on it, it tells you practice items are requirements, which must be reflected in your practice and what you do. This step must be included in what you do. Why? Because the citation that the law states is right here. This is the law. All right, that governs this step. All right, and you're going to see, so P for practice, you'll see citations, and when you go down here, you're going to see documentation. When it says documents, items indicate requirements to be documented in the special education process. They can be addressed on forms or by a person making a statement, a written statement, some kind of written a written composition, a written summary of some dialogue that was had. It is a document or documentation that is required by law, no way around it. How do we know it's required by law? Because it gives us a citation for it. Cited in the law that this document or this documentation is required. When you are getting questions on your exam about what should the educational diagnostician do first, well, it's right here. It's in the law. We follow a procedure and a process that is by law. When it looks like, well, any of these you can take first. No, you can't take any of them first because the law has literally explicitly laid out the process in which something should happen. So by law, only one of those answers can be correct, the first thing that you do. Okay, so that's why it's important to know this process. So again, like we saw in the procedural safeguard booklet, this is saying that all children residing in Texas, regardless of the disability, who are in need of, suspected to need special ed services or some kind of related services, they must be identified, located, evaluated. Here's what special education means again. Special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to the parent to meet your child's specific and unique need, including instruction conducted in a classroom or including something in the home that you may need as a parent, even in hospitals or institutions, everything. Instruction and physical education, everything. Specially designed instruction means, what does that even mean? Adapting general education curriculum. Why? To meet the needs of the child. And why? To give them access as much as possible to general education curriculum. You've probably heard, if you sat in arts, the assurances that we make is that we assure that we're going to educate your child to the maximum extent possible. Where? In general education. The goal of the art committee is to always be as ambitious as possible in making sure that this child has access to general education curriculum to the greatest extent possible. That word is important, possible. We have to make sense whenever we're making decisions for children, right? I mean, but to the greatest extent possible. And I'm going to tell you, this rubs people the wrong way because you have some teachers who are thinking they can't be in gen ed. They can't be in gen ed, they can't do it, they can't grasp it. And here I am, and here you will be as a diagnostician saying, I understand that. However, they qualify for specialized services in the general education setting. So they're going to be in general education. Why? Because it's the obligation of the art committee to ensure it by law that they have access to gen ed curriculum with the supports or with the related services or with the services that they need to be as successful as possible. Sometimes it goes down well, sometimes it doesn't, but for the most part it does. And you'll get skilled at having that conversation over and over and over. Okay, here's what related services mean. Transportation, any kind of service that is developmental or corrective, extended school year, or other supportive, supplementary aids and supportive services that a child with a disability may need. A child with a disability means a child who is evaluated according to an evaluation framework. What does that even mean? Evaluated according to an evaluation framework. That's competency number 2. An evaluation framework is the RTI model. Strengths and weaknesses model. CSEP model, but whatever, that's just me. People love CSEP. So there has to be some kind of state mandated model used to determine if the student has a disability condition. And this word, and determined by the art committee to need to meet the condition that you see listed here. Okay. In addition to students enrolled in public school, child fine duty extends to all of these children. That's basically what it's saying. If they're homeless, if they're in a private school, if they're in homeschool, we're still required and bound by law, right? To do our child fine duty, identification and assessment to determine if they need services or not. Okay, this is really important. Here, the LEA, meaning the school district, must comply with the state's policies. So your school district must follow what Texas's policies and procedures are to prevent over-identification and disproportionality when it comes to race, ethnicity, and students being identified or not identified as special education. You look at your TAPER reports. You can look at the TAPER report for your campus, for your district, and see what percentage of white children, Hispanic children, African-American children, Asian children are identified in special education or not. Is there an overrepresentation or an underrepresentation? Typically, Asian children are underrepresented in special education. African-American males overrepresented in emotional disturbance and behavior identification. Those are trends that you're looking for. That's going to be competency number 6 and 7, professional responsibilities. Here, really important, when a child is referred for special education testing, you have documents that are required. They are required either on a form or some kind of written dialogue that's been captured. The referral process, tutoring, remedial services, compensatory services. How do they respond to RTI? Other academic and behavioral support. Teachers sitting across from you as an educational diagnostician saying, this child has a disability. Y'all haven't tested him. Something's going wrong with him. We need to refer from SPED. I'm saying, okay, yes, ma'am. Where's the data? What documentation do you have? Because I can't evaluate based on your gut instinct. I need data. Why? Because the law literally says there has to be documentation of these things. Really, really important. Interventions, strategies. So this is what you want, and these are hyperlinks. So when you click on them, there's more information so that that helps to guide your study. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second. What questions do you have based on what you've seen so far about the child find process?
I have one. So what if you, for example, you don't have the data, it's just a parent that basically is insisting that there's something wrong with their kid. The teacher, everybody, the teacher says there's nothing wrong. They read the reading levels, they're on level and everything, but the parent is insisting.
Yeah, I love that.
Are you supposed to automatically test because the parent, or can you say, well, we don't have any data to back this up? Let's put the kid in RTI, come back in 6 to 8 weeks and then make a decision? Or
I love that. That's such a good question. We're going to get to timelines. The third part of what we talk about today is going to be timelines embedded in the child find process. And we're going to make sure that we hit refusal to do a special education assessment. We're going to look at that, and we're going to look at what the law says, the lawful steps are, and whether it's automatic or what we need to do about it. That is a fantastic question. When we get to that part of a referral, remind me, Jennifer, and we'll walk through that specifically and see what the law says. Great question. Child find process. Are there any other questions about what you're hearing? This is foundational to what we'll be tested on and to what we'll be doing in the practice as diagnosticians. Does this give light or clarity to anyone? Are these things that you already knew? Nobody, do I have to call on somebody? Shelly, you're smiling at me, so you tell me, what do you think?
I think this is right here for us to read. And I've looked at it before, but honestly, listening to you say it out loud and kind of explain it, it means a whole lot more than what it did when I've just read it as I was trying to do different assignments. So
Sure.
it's like just hearing it has made it make sense.
Good, good, good. Kind of puts it into focus. That's so good. Great, great. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's go to the next part. So that's a procedural safeguard booklet. That's a legal framework as far as what child find is. That's the main law that governs what we do. Now we're going to go to the parent guide for the ART process. Let me look at your study guide quick. So we talked about child find. We looked at child find in both the procedural safeguard booklet and in the legal framework. Now we're going to go to the parent guide to the ART process. I'm going to go back to the legal framework. I'm going to go back to publications. And I'm going to click on the parent guide to the ART process. This is another booklet that we are responsible for giving parents so that they have this. And this is a February 2021 update. So procedural safeguard booklet was February 2022. That was the most current. With the parent guide, February 2021 is the most current. Okay. So again, not to insult your intelligence, but I'm just going to read through and talk through page 1 of this booklet so that we get a clear understanding of what this booklet is, what is the purpose of this booklet. And remember, what we see condensed in this booklet as well is a layman's terms, normal language, easy to understand version for the parent to take in and understand about what the process is of child find and ART for the parent. This is a great place for you to start to get a clear foundational understanding of what is said in this booklet. Then you go back to the legal framework and read it there so that you have the terminology and the vocabulary needed to go through your exam and be able to write about it in your constructive response. Okay, so it says this guide was developed by the statewide leadership for legal framework, the statewide leadership legal framework project team, and by TEA in response to the Texas Education Code. This guide is designed to give you, as a parent of a child who is or may be suspected to be eligible for special education and related services, to give you a better understanding of the special education process and of the procedures, the procedural rights, the steps, the order of the steps, the procedural rights, and your responsibility as a parent, so that you are fully participating in this decision-making process regarding your child's education. IDA, the federal law that governs special education. So we have a federal law that tells the states about the special education process, and each state implements it, how they implement that law. So the federal law tells Texas how to govern that law, and Texas comes up with the policies and these procedures that you see in this booklet. One of the main purposes of IDA is to ensure that children with disabilities have an opportunity to an appropriate public education. It's free of charge. It's appropriate in a public setting that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their specific needs and prepare them for further education, really important, and employment post-high school and independent living post-high school. Okay, special education means, here's a definition again, related services means, here it is again. Okay, under IDA, parents are given a large level of participation. Any question you have about parent participation in this child find process is yes. That's why you see a redesign, a reworking of law and documents, is to make sure the parent is a vital part and piece of the decisions being made for their child. So it refers them again to the notice of the procedural safeguard booklet so they can be aware. And now here's where the law is telling you, as a diagnostician, it is required that they get these booklets, these guidelines, procedures, our document, these two booklets at these times. These are the designated by law. You have to give it to them when they were even requesting initial evaluation. You have to give it to them if they file a complaint. You have to do it if a due process occurs. You have to give them this booklet, this documentation, when you have an MDR, and they may possibly put them in an alternative placement required by law. If these procedures are violated, we violated child find law, and the parent has a reason to file a complaint or go to due process. It's because we violated law, procedures that are required. This is why your questions look so tricky. What should the educational diagnostician do first? It's right here. This process of giving you the documentation, giving you a copy, giving you that, doing this. Okay. In Texas, a child's eligibility for SPED and related services and most major decisions about the child's program are made within the ARC committee. That's the purpose of the ARC committee, is to be making educational decisions about the children. It's called an ARC committee, but interchangeably, we may hear the term IEP. It says this guide will change as state law changes. There's always a copy of the guide available at this link. Okay, now here's where we're going to hang the rest of our time together. There are many dates and deadlines in this special education child find process. Okay, in this publication, those important dates and deadlines are described. In addition to the ones that are listed in this guide for the parent, there's an online companion document. It's also available to help you answer questions about timelines for evaluation, prior written notice, so on, so on, and so on. It is called a timeline decision tree, AKA New Diag Bible. You have got to read this document front to cover. I'm going to show you where it is when you go to this legal framework and you come over here to documents, timeline decision tree. Timeline decision tree. Another way I can say this is the child find process. This is the child find process in pictures. This is it. This is what we do as diagnosticians from beginning all the way to the end. Every question on your exam that has to do with child find is coming from right here. How do I know that? Because this is the law in pictures. You're reading terminology on the framework. You're reading normal language in the parent guide, the art process guide, and here is a picture of it. These are all different ways to say the same thing, child find process. Okay. So I'm going to start right here in red. I have a seminar that I do every summer. I have one starting April 29th. I'm going to do it a couple of times over the summer. It's called First Day Diag Boot Camp. And I made it 3 days. It's 3 days, but I'm condensing it into an 8-hour session this year. I want to try that. And we're going to go over every single thing that you have got to know on day one, walking in as a new educational diagnostician. And the first thing that we talk about at the beginning of this seminar is this. You got to know this, okay? So in red is the initial referral process. Okay, I'm going to click on it because it tells me more information in forms of scenarios and in forms of questions, and you can read that. And this is what we kind of talk about. But the short end of it is when a parent has a concern that their child may be may have a disability, we have 15 days to respond. And frankly, the school district has the right to either propose, agree, yes, we're going to do an evaluation, or no, we're not going to do an evaluation at this time. It is not automatic. Just because a parent or the campus has a concern that a child has a learning disability, it is not automatic. By law, we do not have to evaluate. We can refuse to evaluate for whatever, if we don't have the information. If we look at the information and a student does not indicate, there's no indicator of dyslexia, there's no indicator of a math learning disability, we can refuse to do an assessment.
I have a question on this one.
Yes.
So I'm responding as the diag, or am I collaborating with other people to make the response?
That's a great question. I want to answer that in 2 ways. One, your district is going to determine how and what the response to this question will look like. You have some districts that are going to test. It does not matter. They're not going to tell the parent, no, they don't want those problems. They test them anyway. You have some districts that are going to do due diligence. I happen to be in a district like that. We're going to evaluate the data. A practice, not law, a practice unique to my district is that if I say no, I have to let the campus know and give them an opportunity to sit with me when I meet with the parent to say, we're not going to test them and here's why. It's based on data. Yeah, and I have 15 schools to do that by 15 school days. This is really important. 15 school days. It means a Saturday doesn't count. A Sunday does not count. Christmas Day, Christmas holidays, spring break, those are not school days. They do not count.
I have a question.
Yes.
We are a 4-day district, so we don't go to school on Fridays. Would that Friday be not considered a school? I mean, I know it sounds basic, but some people argue that Friday should be a school day, therefore we should count it. So would that Friday be a school day if we do not go to school on Fridays?
So your instructional calendar has identified for you the instructional school day. Okay, if your school district does not call Friday an instructional school day. It is not a school day. Yeah, if you have early dismissal and there was instructioning happening on that campus, that is an instructional school day, even though they were there half day. Fantastic question. You would go by your instructional calendar. Okay, so if a parent submits a written request for an initial evaluation, so they put on paper, they write it down. My child has dyslexia, I'm having concern. My child, I can't understand them when they speak. They need to be tested. The school must provide the parent with a what? A notice of either proposal or refusal to do the assessment. You have to give the parent prior written notice. That's up here.
Question. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so in the 15 days that you have, you're just telling them if you're going to evaluate or if you're not going to evaluate, you're not giving them a date when the evaluation is going to take place, all right?
No, because you have not gotten consent. We're only at the point of, okay, mom, we hear you. What we're gonna do is talk about it. And we have 15 days to talk with the campus or with the parent or whoever we need to talk to, get some doctor information. And we're going to decide, is this going to be a special education assessment or not? Is there data that indicates data, not feelings? We saw in the law where it says documentation. Is there documentation that there is a suspected disability condition? That's what we're taking these 15 school days to do, review data and meet about it and make a decision on whether or not we're going to assess. And it says no later than the 15th school day after the day the written request or evaluation is received from the parent. So they put it on paper and you have 15 days from that date to give them a notice and consent, or to give them a notice and a refusal. We're not going to test for initial services, prior written notice. This is a form already embedded in your district that's already there. It's a form letter where you plug in the holes basically. And you're saying, dear parent, we received your request for special education. We're going to do it because. Dear parent, we received your request. We are not going to do it because. And they have to get a prior written notice. Look, they have to have another procedural safeguard. You gave them one when they first wrote a letter. When it first came up, boom, automatic. Here's a procedural safeguard booklet. Then you made a decision in 15 days, you're going to give them a prior written notice. Boom, you have to offer another one. Notice a procedural safeguard booklet. Did you need another one, mom? No, you don't. Okay, sign here. Okay, right here.
Okay, I have a question really quickly.
Yes.
Okay, so that right there where it says notice and consent or refusal provide. Okay, so that's what we call like our referral meeting.
Okay.
So after we have like our referral meeting, then we're supposed to send a letter just confirming what we discussed at the referral meeting.
And,
We even send the consent.
yes, yes,
Okay.
that's called prior written notice. That's a fantastic question. Now, this may be a document already in whatever your process is. You may not realize it. It may already be there, but if it's not, you have to give them notice that you're agreeing with them that there is a suspected disability and we are proposing that we do an evaluation and then we give them the separate consent for the evaluation. Yeah, so you give prior written notice first and then you get consent. Absolutely.
So all that is supposed to be done within 15 days. The prior
Absolutely.
written notice, all that. And
Everything.
even the consent all that is
15
supposed to
school
be done.
days,
15 school days. Okay, got you.
all of
Miss
it.
Miss Borden, what does the
Yes.
written, prior written notice look like?
Okay, so a prior written notice is different. It looks different depending on what software the district uses to put their special education information. For example, the software you type in to put your goals, where you're updating your goals,
Okay, yeah,
where you type your class, that software already has a letter embedded in it called prior written notice. You probably don't have access to it because you're not the diagnostician.
right. I've
The
never seen that, yeah.
diagnostician, yeah, the diag can send you a snippet or that paper so you can see what it looks like. So most software like EastBed or eSchool, Success Ed, Frontline, they already have this prior written notice form embedded in it, and we just go in and plug in the holes.
Okay,
Takes 2 seconds. Yeah, really important if something goes down and y'all go to court, they're going to be looking for prior written notice. These things are so easy that they're easy to forget, but they will get you in a world of hurt if they're forgetting, if they're forgotten. Why? Because we're violating law. The parent has a right to notice, written. Okay. Really, 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 really good questions. Any other questions about this? Okay. Let's see where we are. Okay, so referral for initial, you have 15 school days. Let's say that your district agrees to go ahead and do the evaluation and you get consent for assessment. I'm changing, you see how it goes from red to yellow? Then when you scroll down here, it's color coded. So everything red has to do with referral. And then everything yellow has to do with initial referral. That's what I'm doing right now. So the question, when the parent signs the written consent for an initial evaluation, what is a timeline for the completion of the FIE? I'm gonna stop right here. I'm going to quiz you. What is a timeline for an initial evaluation? Gotta know this.
30 days.
45. It's 45 school days.
Okay.
It is 45 school days sometimes.
Depending if
When
it's a
is
read.
it? What is it?
Depending if it's a read.
No.
Okay.
If the child has absences,
Okay,
don't you take that into
that
consideration?
matters. Absences in the initial timeline only matters. They don't give a hoot about absences for a reevaluation. That's completely different. This is not about reevaluation. This is a child's first time ever in life being evaluated for special education. I shouldn't say it that way because that's not accurate, but this is an initial evaluation timeline. 45 school days sometimes. You gotta know this.
They also look at how close it is to the
That
last
is
day
what
of
it
school.
is. That is what it is. So let me show y'all this in the law. These are one of these things. This is a law that was made by somebody who's not an evaluator, who spends no time on the campus. These extra 10 days don't mean a hoot in the evaluation world, but whatever. This is law. Don't let this confuse you. You need to know this, okay? So I'm gonna go back here. And I love this because it clearly walks through all the different scenarios, okay? All right, so when the parent signs consent, what is the timeline? Well, how many days are left in the school year? Right now, if we get out, let's say your district gets out on Memorial Day, right? Hypothetically, if we count from Monday, when you go back to work after Easter, all the way through to May 30th or whatever, if we count only the instructional days, you may see that you only have 20 days left in the school year, or 28 days left in the school year, or 31 days left in the school year. So if you get consent and there's only 30 days left, or 28 days left, or 17 days left in the school year, you have 45 school days to get your testing done. Now, what is the implication of this? If you get consent and there's only 17 days left in the school year, your 45 school days, so you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 17 days left, and then it picks up the next school year when school starts, August 1. So you would pick up counting 18, 19, 20. So you would see that the initial due date would be August 17 or August 30th or September 1st. So if you get a diagnostician job, you need to know walking in that you probably will have evaluations that are due shortly after school starts. If they got consent in late April, if they got consent in May. Okay, you have 45 school days if there are less than 35 school days in the year. So let's go back up. What if you get consent and there's more than 45 days left in the school year? Let's say you got consent in September. We have hundreds of days left in the school year. What if you get consent in October? We have way more than 45 days left in the school year. If you get consent with 45 days or more, same thing applies. You have 45 school days. If there's fewer than 35 days left, you have 45 school days. If there's more than 45 days left, you have 45 school days. Okay, all right. Now, what if you get it during this weird 10-day period? It's just a matter of 10 days, y'all. I don't even know why this last bubble exists, but it does. If you get it, if there's 36 days left in the school year, 37 days left in the school year, 38, 39, if there's 42 days left in the school year, anywhere between 35 and 45 days left in the school year, you have got to have it done on June 30th, no matter what. It means that you're going to be testing over the summer because you can't just not do it. Usually that 35 to 45 school days is right now. It's usually somewhere after spring break and before Easter. It's usually right now. It depends on your instructional calendar. That's why it varies district to district. It depends on when your instructional days are. And then when your kids get out of school. So it's usually right now. So any consent that I got yesterday or last week after spring break, it's going to be due January the 30th. So I'm hustling to get it tested and get the testing done right now, or I'm going to call the parent up during the summer and hope to God that they didn't leave the country for the year, didn't leave the state on vacation for the year, that the parent answers their phone during the summer to bring their kid to the school with a lunch so I can test them for 6 hours, all right, and get that done. So that matters. Okay. So now it matters what day you get consent. It depends on how many days are left in the school year and when it's due. There's another factor that Erica brought up that has to do with absences, okay? So going back to the beginning, you agreed to do consent, you gave prior written notice, and you got consent for assessment. When is this initial due? Well, how many days are left in your school year? The first question, but the next question is, okay, well, has a kid been absent? Fewer than 3, doesn't even matter, doesn't phase a single thing. It does not phase. If they were absent one time during an initial timeline, doesn't matter, doesn't change it. If they are absent twice, if they were absent twice, it does not matter. When they are absent 3 times or more, 1 time doesn't matter, 2 times does not matter. 3, it matters. Plus, and you can see how this killed us during COVID. Killed us. Kids are out 15 days, 20 days, killed us. So it stretches. It's a mess. And that's really not what you want to do. Like some people are thinking, oh my God, yay, I have 20 extra days. No, because you have other evaluations still coming in, nothing stops. So no, you want the child at school so you can test them, get it done and move on to your next one. So here's what happens if they're absent 3 days or more. The initial FIE must be completed and signed. Look at that. That's what these updates do. They just throw in extra words. So completed and signed. And what dated? No later than the 45 school days following the date on which you gave consent, plus the number of days the student was absent. So if the student was absent for 3 days and they were due on September 1st, but they were absent 3 days, it's September 1st plus 3 more days. September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So they'll be due on September the 4th instead of the 3rd because they were absent for 3 days or absent for 6 days or absent for 20. It's day for day, day for day, day for day after the 3rd absence. It does not have to be consecutive. They don't have to be absent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Oh, boom. No, they can be absent in October, absent 2 more times, 3 weeks later, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be consistent. Just within that timeline, if they're absent 3 days, then you add to the timeline, whether it's 45 days.
I have a question on this one.
Sure.
So it says 45 days, the FIE. So that's when you are in the R telling them that, yes, they qualify for a specific learning disability and they can start services right away. And that is the signature right there. That's the signature that it's counted.
Great question. Let's talk about that. This is going to be a 2-part answer because we're in Texas and this is how we do special education around here. There's never like one square straight answer. Barbara, 99.999% of the time, you're going to be doing an initial evaluation on a child who has never been in special education ever. Okay. If they have never been in special education ever, an art committee would have never met. They won't even have an art committee yet because they haven't been in special education. So it's just you and the parent. And the date that you get consent from that parent, like you gave them prior written notice, gave them a procedural safeguard booklet, gave them the parent guide to the art process, and you're getting consent saying we're going to test, that's the date that counts. Okay. 1% of the time, y'all, do not let this confuse you. You're going to get a kid from out of state, transfer kid, California, Louisiana. It's a out of state transfer that walks in to your district as a transfer from California with special education papers. They qualify as learning disabled or dyslexia in California, and they're at your school now with these California documents. And you're looking at these transfer documents and you're saying, okay, California said they were dyslexic, but California didn't give the same test that we give in Texas. Or California used a framework that we do not use in Texas. You have to evaluate them again by law. You have to evaluate them again by law, if it's not what your district considers appropriate for Texas, when you evaluate that student from California again, they follow an initial timeline. Okay, Barbara, the reason that's different is because you would have had an art because they're already in special education, but they're just coming from California, and you would have had a meeting. I want to change that. Some districts don't require you to meet. So it could be that your district requires you to have an art for a transfer kid when they first get there, like when they first touch down, and you'll look at the art documents together and you decide we can't accept this California information. We have to test them again. It's going to follow an initial timeline. Okay, so there's times when you're going to pick up with an initial timeline for a child that's already been identified. Okay, another issue could be that, let's say they're from Texas and they were evaluated in kindergarten and they did not qualify. But here we are in 5th grade. And there's a concern again, and you're going to do testing again. That's going to be an initial evaluation as well. So there'll only be one potential time where you would have had an art meeting to talk about an initial, and that is only in the case of a transfer. Any other time, there's no R that even exists yet because it's the first time. It's an initial time. It's the first time that they're being evaluated for special education. Hopefully that was not confusing, but it is outlined in the law there in that timeline decision tree. So most of the time, Barbara, it's just you and the parent because no art meeting exists yet.
Okay, and then after that, let's say that you test, you meet again after that, and that's when you give the FIE. Do they have to, they signed that day, right? The FIE.
So, okay, let's back up, Barbara. Ask that question one more time. I think I missed the first part.
So let's say that they qualified, you tested, they qualify, you meet again for the art meeting, and they agree on starting the services right away. So that is the signature that's counted towards the FIE.
No, that's a fantastic question. On the 45th school day, it's your signature on that FIE as the evaluator, saying that this student does qualify for a disability or not. It's not the art committee yet. You're not there yet. We're just finishing the testing and putting our test kit away. We just finished writing. And then I sign saying that I did this testing and that I am saying they do or they don't have dyslexia, or they do or they don't have an intellectual disability. And I signed the report verifying that me, a certified diagnostician, made this decision. That's the signature that they're talking about on the FIE. Fantastic question. Really, really good. Okay. What other questions do we have about this? Jennifer, did that answer your question about the refusal and the process of the refusal?
Yes.
Yeah, so even if we refuse to do testing, we still have the right in a prior written notice. We're giving you notice that we are not going to do an assessment and you will not be signing consent today. And you have to explain why in your prior written notice. And you're either saying, there's no data that indicates that there's a disability condition or the campus has not expressed concerns, so on and so on and so on. Shelley, question?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So this was probably what's messed me up the most with this test. So you have 15 days, the parents or someone refers, parents refer, you have 15 days to say yes or no. And then once you say yes or no, you have 45 school days to test. And
Yes.
then,
Oh, wait a minute. Let's go back and look at that. That's a fantastic question. because that matters. Now, notice that when it says 45 days, it does say school days. Okay,
Right.
so there's school days. Now, I want to scroll down, because in your reading, you want to pay attention to this. When it's time to have your ARD, 30 days later, they don't care if it's school or not.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times parents will say, well, you have 45 school days to do this.
Uh-huh.
And then I thought it was you have 45 school days to test and schedule the ARD and
Mhm,
or to have the ARD, but actually it's 45 school days to test.
mhm.
And then you have 30 calendar days to actually have the ARD. Is that
Exactly
correct?
right. That's exactly right. You're
Right.
counting Saturdays, you're counting Sundays, you're counting Christmas, everything. The state of Texas does not care. You have 30 days, period. If it is on a calendar, that day counts. If it exists on a calendar, that is a day that you're counting to have these ARDs. Yeah, 30 calendar days, it matters. That means that if you have a, report that's dated May 15, what are you gonna do? When is the ARD due? Those are dates. When you read through that decision tree timeline, it's gonna tell you when it's actually due. So it gets really tricky. You have to make sure that you sit with that decision tree timeline, really work with it. And as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and work through that so that you can have that. Let me share my screen again. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about the initial timeline to have the ARD, okay? So we went through all the scenarios for the initial FIE. Now we're going to go through all the scenarios for an initial IEP, okay, for initial ARD meeting. When the initial evaluation is completed, we're done. It's signed. We're finished. What is the timeline from the date on the report to hold the ARD meeting? Okay. Was the consent received in that weird 35 to 45 school days when it's due on June 30th? Did you get consent when the report was due on June 30th? Yes, I did. My report is going to be dated June 30th. Has the student been absent fewer than 3 days? Yeah, it doesn't matter. Right here, when the consent was received in this weird 10-day period, and the student was not absent between consent and the last instructional day, the ARD committee has to have the meeting by the 15th school day. Okay, so this means that when you walk in to your diag job next school year, and you get a report and it's dated June 30th, alarms are going off in your mind, ding, 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 ding. I have to have an initial ARD meeting by the 15th day of school. Okay, that means you're gonna walk in having ARDs. This is why I do a first day diag. Like you have to know like what you don't have time to get there and like figure out what do I do. You have to walk in knowing, right? So here's the other thing. Now, let's say we're planning the initial ARD meeting. Report is done. We did not get consent at that weird 10-day period. Okay, we got consent on a normal school day, so it's not this weird 10-day period. I'm gonna put no. Then you have 30 calendar days, no matter what. If you got consent in May, the initial FIE is doing 45 school days, hypothetically, let's say August 15th. Your initial FIE is going to be dated August 15th. You would have been on a job for 3 weeks. You're planning the initial FIE meeting. You would have to know that you only have 30 calendar days to review that August 15th initial FIE. 30 calendar days would be roughly sometime before August 15th. I'm sorry, before September 15th. 30 calendar days. Very important. Okay, so it matters. When you got consent depends on how everything else follows. Okay, the date that you got consent on, it matters because it determines when the FIE is actually due and when your initial IEP is actually due. Okay, questions about that, and you don't have to know it by memory. Well, you do for the exam. So let me restate that. I'm going to say, like, when you're in the job, you're going to have this pinned up, like you'll have this all over the place, but you do have to have it from memory for your exam. So it's important that you review it and be very comfortable with it. Okay. Questions about timelines for the initial referral, initial evaluation, initial IEP.
You did an awesome job explaining that. Thank you
Oh,
so
well, thank
much.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions about the procedural safeguard booklet, the parent guide to the ART process, or prior written notice? Those are all required. So if you get an exam, if you get a question on the exam, I think I saw this on the Pearson practice test, and it said a parent contacts you about a concern that their child has ADHD, and they concern, and you are in the process of responding back to the parent. What should the educational diagnostician do first? And there are multiple questions, the multiple answers, of course. There was one, like A was contact the doctor and get medical information. There was one crazy outlier. It was one crazy, obviously wrong answer. There was another reasonable one about go ahead and get consent for assessment. One was talk to the psychologist, the school psychologist, and the other was give a procedural safeguard booklet. What should the educational diagnostician do first? According to law, what would you do first?
The booklet.
You see how I'm saying that you have to understand the procedural safeguards. Those questions are not confusing if you understand the explicit structure and procedure. Because I can see how somebody's looking at that like, you should call a psychologist because we don't do ADHD. Of course, you will let the school psychologist know, and you would get consent, and you would give them a procedural safeguard booklet. There's only one of them that you do first. Okay, so you would have to pay attention to that process. Okay, really good. Any other questions? Really, really good. Down here.
Question, the next one that you have scheduled,
Yes.
okay, but it's the 22nd.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
an extension of this, or is it going
No.
over the same?
Competency 2. So I'm
Okay.
going to move on to competency 2. I'm going to take one topic under competency 2. The way I usually choose what to talk about under each competency is by what people usually have the most questions on. Usually this competency 2 has everything to do with testing. It's all things testing. So I'll probably pull out a topic that has to do with testing, and usually it's about the disability conditions. How do you know that somebody is learning this? Like, what are you looking for learning disabled? How do you know, dyslexia? What is that? What is that? How do you even test for that? What does that mean? So when we meet again On the second, that's what we're going to be talking about is competency 2. And then I'll have 2 more for May. Competency 3, competency 4, and I'll go on and on and on and on.
Do you have these already recorded? If like I'm wanting to test at the end of April,
Mhm,
and I honestly feel like I have learned more today than I have
mhm.
in my class.
Oh,
And
good,
so
good.
do you have it recorded so that I can watch your message before I
Yeah.
test?
The only thing that I have that you would be able to use in that time frame is on the website. I have a very small library. Oh, that's not even the right one. Of if I can get to it, let's see. Here we are. This is the website, and if you go to products and services, I have this little bitty library of what competency 1, 2, and 3. Why? Because that is the largest part. I haven't uploaded the other parts, the other like competency 4, which is domain 2, 3, and 4. Because usually people are like, I have got to take a test in 8 days or 7 days or 10 days or whatever. And I always put the 34% of the exam. This is it. So if you're testing in a few days, really, this is the option to nail competency or domain 1, which is the largest part of the exam. These videos are here for you to purchase. There's a video and there's a study guide, much like you saw today. It's the same format, or you have this exam prep option. And the difference is this exam prep course, the course is all 4 domains recorded, including the constructive response.
Okay,
So it's what it
I have a
looks like.
question.
Yes.
So like when I did the practice on my domain 1, I got an 87%.
Okay.
And I know it's probably not the issue. The issue is the domain 2. Is there any way that I could buy the domain 2? Because I know that's
No, yeah, people like you, I don't sell them separate because it wasn't recorded separately. Like one video goes into the next and they'll say pause, and then they'll go into the next and go into the next. So it's not a way for me to separate them cleanly so that people don't miss part of the others. It is like one seamless all the way through. So it's really, really important to see it in the full context because I'm referring to things that I would have said in the videos prior to. Does that make sense? So there's not a clean way to separate it where you just have, I didn't do it separately. It was one session that I did and videotape them all. Great, 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 great question. Okay. So that's kind of what these are extended opportunities. I would say if you have at minimum, and I do mean minimum,
so I got a question.
yeah, go for
So
it.
what could you use to study for those competencies? Because that's the hardest part that I've been like that domain 2, like that is, and I guess because I haven't been in the classroom
That's
in
the thing. No, competency.
in like
Now,
8
we're
years.
saying domain 2. Domain 2 has to do with intervention. So domain 2 is curriculum, instruction, intervention for how the disability condition manifests in the classroom environment. The question is, what does dyslexia look like manifested in the learning environment? That's how you should be attacking domain 2. What do you do for the characteristics of this disability condition and how it manifests in the learning environment, in the school environment, in the home environment? You have to know the disability conditions first. If you do not know the criteria for a disability condition, you cannot answer domain 2. It's all interconnected, it's all related, it's all connected. You have to know what an intellectual disability is, the criteria for an intellectual disability, how it looks, how it manifests in reading, how it manifests specifically in math, to make a specific intervention recommendation in math for a student with an intellectual disability. If you're missing domain 2, the larger question is, do you understand the disability categories, the criteria, and how it manifests? It's less about having intervention strategies in your pocket. You got to know when to pull it out and what it's supplementing. What is the deficit? What's missing? What gap is being filled when you make a recommendation for an intervention or an instructional strategy? Yeah, so you would have had to master competency 2 to get the domain number 2. All of it is connected. It's all prior knowledge, all from competency 1, 2, and 3. If competency 1, 2, and 3, that's why it's the largest part of your exam. If that's not answered, we can't do 4 and 5 curriculum. We can't do 6 and 7 ethics, professional practices. If we don't understand the law, competency 1 is law. You cannot know your ethics or professional responsibilities in competency 6 if you have not mastered number 1, competency 1. You see, so it's all related. So it seems like you can attack it in sections and in parts, but it's really one seamless thing. So you would want to make sure you spend time, specifically, Jennifer, in the framework having to do with evaluations. And in that framework, it's explaining the criteria for a disability condition. And then you can think more thoughtfully about, what intervention is needed for a speech impairment when you understand the criteria to be speech impaired. You see what I'm saying there? So that may be beneficial for your study. And that competency 2 on the video, you can get that, look through that, read through that. I can't remember exactly what I go through there, but it has to do with assessment, whatever it is. And you might find that beneficial. Yeah.
Oh.
If you have, I would say anyone that has 20 days, and I'm talking minimum cramming, burning candle oil, do you hear me? 20 days. Then the exam prep course, purchasing it would be the biggest bang for your buck. If you want to do a deep dive into these competencies and get this well-rounded picture. If you have 15 days or less, if you have 15 days or less and you have mastered other parts of the domain, I can see how it can be like an overinvestment, right? If you only need one part, or you bite the bullet, buy it, sit with it, get what you need, and keep it for practice, because you're going to need it. It's one thing to study for an exam. The other part is you have to live as a diet, like for real, when you get in the job. So the investment is never wasted. So I will say that. And there is a private group that Latera is in, where we do ongoing, I will say that. I mean, once you make the investment, you have me for life. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but there's ongoing, stuff that we talk about. As a matter of fact, I have one today at 11 that I'll be doing with that group. Okay, so there's that. I know I have talked y'all to death. It's 1:44. Is there anything else, any other questions or thoughts that I can help you with? Let's see, 45 after evaluation. Oh, you were answering questions, Allison. Got it. Sorry, just not seeing that. I'm sorry. All right, y'all. You have my email. You have my phone number. You can email me. You can text me. I'll be back at, what, I think we said August 22nd, 9 o'clock. We'll do competency too. Okay? If you need anything else, just reach out and let me know. I have thoroughly enjoyed y'all. I love doing these. I hope that it brings some clarity and gives you some context and some structure to your study. Okay? All right, y'all. I'm literally praying for you all. I pray that you do well. All right? If you need anything else, just let me know. Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
for your
No
time.
problem. It's my pleasure.